You wanted a better offensive performance from the Tar Heel basketball team? Well, you got it, particularly in the second half. Biscuits!
You are Locked On Tar Heels, your daily podcast on the UNC Tar Heels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, it's Monday, November 14th, 2022. Welcome into the Locked On Tar Heels podcast, the only daily North Carolina show out there. I'm your host, Isaac Shea. Thanks so much for joining me and making Locked On Tar Heels your first listen or your first watch every single day. Please don't forget we're free and available anywhere you get podcasts, so you can subscribe right now to make sure you don't miss a second of your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Sling TV. Don't miss tomorrow's matchup between UNC and Gardner-Webb right there on the ACC network on Sling. Sling, the TV you love for a price you love. Try it today. Well, folks, we want to unpack this College of Charleston game from Friday night. We had a short postcast about it, but wanted to do it in a little more depth and detail. And so I want to talk about later why this team hasn't figured out who they are yet. We're going to get into that. I want to talk about some things that aren't going well and why I think they aren't going well so far. But I want to start with where we always start with our basketball game recaps, our Four Corners recap, as a way of honoring Coach Dean Smith and his legendary Four Corners offense. So that's where we start. Four Corner number one. The story of this game, as I alluded to off the bat, was the explosion, the offensive explosion of the second half. Carolina, who scored 43 points in the first half and shot 50%, comes out in the second half and shoots 71.4% in the second half. That's the second highest half, like in any half under Coach Davis in his early career. That game was Florida State last year. The Tar Heels shot 74.2%. That's ridiculous. So Carolina, who scored 43 points in the first half, comes out and reels off to where they score 102 in the entire game. Absolutely ridiculous second half. And you hope that is the target. Not that they were bad or anemic offensively in the first half, but boy, that second half was something different. And you hope that they have unlocked something that they'll be able to build upon for the rest of the season. So was that just a micro moment, or was that a macro of bigger things to come? I'm really curious to see how they come out against Gardner-Webb tomorrow on Tuesday. Number two for our Four Corners, the biggest story of that big half were two guys that you expect to be huge and two guys that the nation expects to be huge, and that's Armando Bacot and Caleb Love. Quite frankly, I know he said the offense as a whole was great. It's very solid in the first half. Armando was just essentially a ghost. He was nowhere to be found. At halftime, this dude had 1 point and 1 rebound. And it's not that he wasn't hitting shots. It's just that whatever Charleston was doing to him was rendering him completely ineffective. 1 shot from the floor, he missed it, and was 1 for 3 from the free throw line. That was his 1 point. 1 rebound, no blocks, 1 steal. But you saw the final box score, right? You know what he did in the second half. Armando had 28 total points. That means he scored 27 in the second half. He had 6 rebounds in total, not Armando Bacot like. We'll talk more about that soon. But then he also had 3 steals and 2 blocks. And so what a stat line for this dude. Oh, and by the way, he drew 11 fouls on Charleston. That is what you need your big man to do. As for Caleb Love, he didn't have quite the same lack of a first half, but 8 points, it's fine. It's good. But he finished with 25. So he himself had 17 points in the second half. And then beyond just putting the ball in the basket, Caleb Love had a career high 9 rebounds. He had 6 assists. That's triple-double territory, folks. He's getting into there, like legitimately close. 4 assists shy, 1 rebound shy, to go along with 2 steals and 1 block. And oh, by the way, just 1 turnover for Caleb Love. Getting off to a great start, taking care of the ball and distributing the ball in these first 2 games of the season. A very encouraging sign to me that Caleb Love is taking this efficiency and decision-making much more seriously this season. Love to see it. All right. Number 3 in our 4 corners takeaway. It is hashtag Leaky Lockdown season. If Carolina is going to get this complete version of Leaky Black this season, watch out. Watch out, folks, because it means that not only is he continuing to do what he does defensively, but he's adding a more consistent offensive production to his game. Not that he's never had offense, but being able to do it consistently, forcing defenses to stay up on him, to not sag off and go double other people. Boy, that's crazy. So let's just look at some of what he did defensively. If this was somebody else, you'd be like, holy smokes. But with Leaky, you just expect what I'm about to tell you. So Charleston's leading scorer, their leading returning scorer as well, Rain Smith. He's an Aussie, like very, very good basketball player. Scored 12 points a game last season, was their second leading scorer, but was the leading returning scorer. Had 19 against the Tar Heels last year, had 24 in Charleston's first game this year against Chattanooga. But who's guarding him in this game? Yeah, Leaky, because Coach Davis will do that. Remember, and I anticipated and predicted this, said it leading up to the game, because there was precedent for it last season. Even though there's a height discrepancy, Coach Davis put Leaky Black on Kihei Clark last year from Virginia, their lead guard, to basically disrupt the head of the snake. Because if you can take Kihei Clark away, Virginia wasn't doing anything, even though Kihei Clark's like 5'10 and Leaky's 6'9. Similar here. Leaky is 6'9, Rain Smith is just 6'2. But Coach Davis knows what that length is going to bother him, and then that scoring is going to have to come from somewhere else. Well, it certainly did in the first half come from somewhere else, less so in the second half. And so Rain Smith finishes this game 3 points. 1, 2, 3, made 1 3-pointer. That was all his scoring. But perhaps the thing that is a little bit wackier than normal with Leaky, and you see this occasionally, but usually I just like to point out the scoring. Rain Smith only had 4 shot attempts. 4. This dude, yeah, like that doesn't happen. In fact, in his career, now he's just a sophomore, so he's not had that long of a career, but only had 1 game in his Charleston career so far with fewer shot attempts. There was a game last year where he had 2. Leaky Black does not only stop you from scoring, he stops you from being able to try to score. And that, like, catch the difference in those 2 things. Big time. Now, I said the complete player. It's like Leaky's in that commercial where it's part of this complete breakfast. It ain't just the cereal. It's the juice and the coffee and the grapefruit as well. And you got to have it all. Leaky scores 15 points, 1 off his career high, a perfect 6 of 6 from the floor, including 2 for 2 from the 3-point line. In fact, that was the first points of the game for the Tar Heels, was a made Leaky Black 3. He adds to it 5 rebounds, 1 block, and 1 steal. Great stat line from Leaky. The one about it that I know he himself is going to be upset about is 0 assists. He's not going to love that, but he also didn't have any turnovers, which is great. Carolina as a team has under 10 turnovers in each of their first 2 games, and even some of those you look at and think, yeah, they could minimize those. So Carolina is doing a great job taking care of the ball right now. And then the final of the 4 corners takeaways is that I am really encouraged by the 2 freshmen we've seen on the court so far, Seth Trimble and Tyler Nickel. Let's start with Tyler Nickel. Didn't score any points in game 1 against UNC Wilmington, but scores 8 points in this game against Charleston in less than 8 minutes. He played like 7.5 minutes. I've talked a lot this offseason, as has Pat Kilby when he's on the show, about Tyler Nickel being an offensive microwave when he comes into the game, and that's something you love to see off the bench. Remember Carolina's bench scoring last year? Yeah, slim to none. And so if Tyler Nickel can bring that, boy, it's going to be something you really, really want to see. As for Seth Trimble, comes in, is just making good, solid plays within himself, isn't trying to do too much. You see his athleticism on display from the get-go. But the thing that has impressed me most about him so far in each of the first two games is his defensive tenacity, both as part of the team defensive psychology or philosophy and as an individual defender. A great example from this game was there was a play where he was all up in the defender. Looked like he was playing very solid defense, but got whistled for what I thought shouldn't have been called reach in. But then on the very next play, instead of backing off of it because he was like, oh, I can't get whistled again. No, same like dogged tenacity up in the Charleston player who had the ball. And this time, the Charleston player gets whistled for an offensive foul because of Trimble's tenacity. You combine that with Leaky Black and then what Puff Johnson can do defensively when he's back. Oh my word. This team has the potential to be very good defensively. And as we've said a couple times already this early part of the season, that's what you're going to need in a game like Wilmington when the shots aren't falling as much. Both these freshmen we've seen so far are incredibly tenacious. They're aggressive. They're not afraid of the moment. They're not afraid of stepping in and doing what this team needs them to do to look at taking that last step and winning the national championship this season. Unfortunately, though, it wasn't all rainbows and roses for the team in these first two games. There are some question marks, and we need to talk more about them and investigate them, which we'll do. But first, let me remind you that this episode is brought to you by Upside. Inflation has us thinking, all of us thinking about ways to cut back, like driving less or dining out less, whatever it may be. And there's nothing fun about that. But because of it, I started using Upside, which gets me money back literally every time I go to the gas station. I always find a gas station I can use with Upside, and I go there. And so because of that, I don't have to cut back as much because of using Upside. And now there's the extra cash in my pocket. To get started, download the free Upside app using promo code LOCKED and get $5 or more cash back on your first purchase of $10 or more. Claim an offer for whatever you're buying on Upside, check in at the business, and then pay as usual with your credit or debit card, and then get paid. In comparison to credit card rewards or loyalty programs, you can earn 3 times more cash back with Upside. So download the free Upside app and use promo code LOCK to get $5 or more cash back on your first purchase of $10 or more. Again, that's $5 or more cash back on your first purchase of $10 or more using promo code LOCKED. And for your second listen today, check out Locked On Sports Today. From the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights that only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today is available on YouTube or Odyssey, anywhere else you get your podcasts. So what I alluded to is, or what we talked about going to next, is that there are some curious question marks to the first two games of the season that are out of line with what you expected from this team coming into this season. So I want to touch on those and begin the conversation about why they may be happening and see if we can start to get some answers to that, which in truth is just giving our best educated guesses. And then we'll get more answers to this as the season continues to unfold. Because the question is, with all of these, are they just a small sample size 2-game offshoot of what the season is going to be, or are they indicators of what's going to be season-long trends? We don't know, but I want to help see if I can give you an answer to that. First off is the team rebounding. And I think that's a thing because everyone expects Carolina's just going to roll out of bed and beat you at rebounding. As I've said multiple times since these two games have happened, the Tar Heels were out-rebounded last season 3 times. The entire season, the Tar Heels were only out-rebounded 3 times last year. Kentucky, Tennessee, and the first Duke game. They lost all 3 of those games. In 2 games this season, they've already been out-rebounded twice. They are 2/3 of the way to being out-rebounded as many times as the entire 2021-22 season. That is bonkers to me. The Wilmington game, they were out-rebounded 37-32. This game by Charleston, they were out-rebounded 35-32. So neither of them were massive deficits, down 5 and down 3. But still, If that's happening against Wilmington and Charleston, what are you going to do when you come up against a high major opponent with size even bigger than yours? You're going to need more people helping out in rebounding, like Caleb Love getting 9. That is incredible. But Pete Nance, you got to get more than 1 rebound as you did against Charleston, right? Like there are things like that that have to happen. We're going to talk about Armando in just a second, but he's not been holding up his usual end of the bargain. Now, of course, when you're making 70% of your shots in a half, it's going to be more difficult to rebound because there aren't many. Also, against Charleston, they're a tenacious offensive rebounding team, and that bore itself out on Friday night. So the second thing that has become a trend for me that I've noticed in these first 2 games is that Armando Bacot has no double-doubles yet. No what I like to call dub-dubs. I'm going to continue to call them dub-dubs because somebody told me that they didn't like it when I said dub-dubs, and that makes me want to say it more now. That's why I just said it about 5 times to you. So take that. But seriously, the points have been there. He's hit double-digit points, in particular this most recent game, but the rebounding hasn't been there to Armando Bacot's standard. To many people's standards, what he's done has been phenomenal because he had 9 rebounds in game 1. Likely would have gotten to double-digit rebounds was it not for the foul trouble he had in game 1, right? Missed a lot of the second half sitting on the bench. He had 6 rebounds in this game. So he's averaging a very respectable 7.5 rebounds a game. For a lot of people, that's fantastic. For Armando Bacot, we're not talking about respectable. We're talking about Armando Bacot, the guy who tied the NCAA single season record for double-doubles in one season last year. That's what you're expecting from him and what you haven't gotten thus far this season. I don't know what to make of this because it's not like Pete Nance is taking the rebounds away. I just said he only had 1 in this game. I think part of it in game 1, legitimately, he's at double digits without foul trouble. In this game, I think there was so little that he did in the first half that he just wasn't able to get there in the second half. And there weren't, it just wasn't there. So keep watching what Armando's going to do. But in this game, both with Armando and the team as a whole, the height advantage Carolina had was overwhelming. I've done it previously, run through all the height advantage the Tar Heels had, but just trust me that it was insane across the board at just about every position in this one. And so Armando's got to get on it. The third thing that has been a weird anomaly so far is the 3-point shooting. Carolina was 2 for 10 in game 1, an anomaly both in terms of how few they hit and how few attempts they took, right? Just 10. That was lower than any single game last season. In this one, the attempts were back up to 20, but only made 5. So in 2 games, the Tar Heels are 7 for 30 from 3-point range, 23.3%. Yikes. That's got to improve. Caleb in particular has to be more efficient. I believe he was 1 for 9 against Charleston. That's going to get better, and it will. Same with RJ. Pete Nance still hasn't hit a 3 yet. You're expecting that's going to happen. It'll get there. But, Leaky hit 2 for 2, and that's what we're celebrating. No, other guys got to get in on this. Tyler Nichols going to be a guy that's going to hit some 3s. He hit 1 of the 5 against Charleston. You expect that when Jalen Washington is healthy and in, he will be doing some of this as well. All right, the fourth thing that has been interesting to watch and curious is just Pete Nance's slow start. He is having a positive impact on the game. That is true. And I think he's still working to find his niche and his way a little bit with this team. Remember, he's coming from Northwestern, who is not a great basketball team, quite frankly, coming to this team that is a great basketball team, quite frankly. Now, he's got all the skill sets. He has everything he needs to be able to do. I think there's just kind of still some, now that games are going, getting used to being with this crew, everyone figuring each other out. I think it's about finding his role, his way, and settling down into it. We're going to say more about that in our final bit, talking point today too. And also, folks, just the 3s are going to come. He's 0 for 3 so far, but he's going to get there. It's going to happen. It just hasn't yet in any of these public things. In the exhibition game, he didn't shoot well from three either. So just Pete Nance is going to get there. It just takes some time. The same, even though we're not comparing Pete and Brady, the same was true for Brady last year. He took a while to get settled in and to get his. Pete Nance has a game coming. You just wait on it. Well, I don't yet have a feel for this team, but here's the thing. I don't think this team has a feel for this team. What do I mean? I'll tell you about it right after I tell you that this episode is brought to you by Nissan. This week's thrilling moment in college basketball is brought to you by Nissan. The thrilling designs behind the new lineup from Nissan are intended to empower drivers in vehicles as capable as the driver themselves. And when I think of unbelievable abilities on the court for this week's thrilling moment, it has to be unquestionably Armando's 27 points in the second half of the game against College of Charleston. Just realizing like, hey, what I did in the first half isn't going to work for this team, and I got to step it up. And step it up he did. I hope that that has unlocked something for Armando, and he comes out against Gardner-Webb on Tuesday just absolutely on fire and all over the court. This segment has been inspired by the thrilling new designs featured across Nissan's lineup of vehicles. Pursue what thrills you in the all-new Frontier, Armada, or Pathfinder today. Available now at nissanusa.com. So as I said, after two games, I gotta say, I don't really have a feel for this Carolina basketball team. But here's the kicker. I don't think they necessarily have a feel for themselves as a team quite yet. Why? I've got 4 ideas about that. There's still no Puff Johnson, and there's still no Jalen Washington. Now, Jalen Washington obviously is going to be a new addition to this team who hasn't yet shown or done stuff, but he was expected to be part of this team. The bigger thing is no Puff Johnson yet. We've already seen everything Puff can do, and it's a lot of different things. It's not just he's like, hey, I'm really elite at this. It's just that he is a Swiss Army knife that can do so many things well and add so many things to this team, and he's got all the trust of Coach Hubert Davis. Carolina needs Puff Johnson. The first half of the Charleston game, as the Tar Heels were getting down by 7, he would have been massively influential on what happened in that half, and would have been he just would have been a better matchup for some of Charleston's personnel in what they were trying to do to Carolina. And so he would have been out there. And so in this game against Charleston, Jalen Washington was dressed. He's cleared now. But remember, folks, this is somebody coming off of not having played basketball in over a year. This is somebody that is going to still have to find their way back into game shape and into game action and what that looks like. He doesn't roll out and play 30 minutes a game. Carolina, frankly, doesn't need him to anyway, which is great. But, expect 5 to 10 minutes a game to get his sea legs, and then you go from there. He'll do it, but it's going to take some time. As for Puff, it's just hard to know because of his injury histories. Like, when is he going to be ready to go? It's when we see it. And so you just have to stay tuned for that. Number 2, another part of the reason I don't think this team has really figured themselves out yet is role definition. Role definition is one of the single most important things for any basketball team. If players both understand their role and accept that role, whether it's I don't play it all in the games, but I am doing everything in practice to get this team ready, or whether it's I'm playing 35 minutes a game and the leading scorer, or anyone in between, if you understand your role, accept it, and lean into it, that can make any team go crazy. And that's what last year's team did. Things clicked when everyone after the Dewey Ferris players only meeting. That's when things really took off. And I think that was part of it, is people just began to buy in to what they were being asked to do. So who is needed to do what, and then they got to go and do it. That's it. That takes time sometimes, especially in the transfer portal era where you're working in new teams or new people from different squads that have different experiences and all that. Number 3, part of the reason I don't think this team quite has itself figured out yet is that Pete Nance part of his role definition scenario is that he's trying to learn how to be a 4 in one lineup and a 5 in another lineup. When Bacot's in the game, Pete Nance is the 4. He's playing the role that he projects to play at the NBA level, right? That's what we're looking at and looking for here. When Bacot's out of the game, he is the 5. He is the center and has to play a different role. And that calls for similar things, but different enough that he's going to have to be able to move back and forth basically between those two things. And so once Pete Nance can figure that out, I think it's going to help the team figure out who they are and how they work well together. Number 4, part of getting a feel for yourself is a new type of thing. And what I mean by that is Carolina, who for so long has been a team that featured under Roy Williams 2 traditional bigs, like a wing and 2, like a point guard and a shooting guard, like a traditional basketball lineup, has opportunities to go away from that in a really big way this year. Now, I know some of Roy Williams' later teams did that, but this team has the ability and the option to go with this Davis, Love, Trimble lineup that I talked about all off season, that I talked about after game 1, and that I talked about after this Charleston game. Right now is that team or that lineup could be an absolute difference maker to what Carolina is able to do and the way they're able to both attack and defend another team. But when you haven't played a ton of that kind of thing, it takes you a while to figure out what that is and what it looks like. And so as they do it, I think it's going to be, I've used the word and I'll use it again, devastating for opponents. And so Carolina just has to keep leaning into that and figuring it out so that they can do that, but then also come back out with what they normally do. And so we're going to see different iterations of these guard lineups. Sometimes we've seen it as well already in this young season with 4 guards, those 3 plus DeMarco Dunn. And so all of these are realities. Now, we can't get out of here without the shady stat of the game. And guess what? I've got a bonus shady stat of the game for you. So let me get the sunglasses on and let's go. I talked about how Carolina shot such a ridiculous field goal percentage in the second half against Charleston. Well, for the game, the Tar Heels shot 60.3% from the field. That is the highest single field goal percentage of Coach Hubert Davis's young career. And you love to see that in game 2, coming on the heels of me saying we got to get a better offensive performance out of this team. Well, they sure did. They boy sure did. Let's keep setting those records. The bonus shady stat of the game, Caleb Love has scored 20 or more points 16 times in his career. You know what Carolina's record is in those 16 games? 16-0. The Tar Heels have never lost when Caleb Love scores at least 20 points, and they need to continue to do more of that. Efficient Caleb Love. I love efficient Caleb Love. Keep it going. All right, folks, thanks so much for tuning in. That's it for today's episode of Locked On Tar Heels. Coming up tomorrow, we're going to preview the Gardner-Webb game for Tuesday night. Also, if you haven't checked it out, there's a second full episode up on today, on Monday, recapping Carolina's football victory over Wake Forest. Make sure to check out, for your second listen of the day, Locked On Sports Today podcast. The biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day. It's available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever else you get podcasts. Hey, thanks so much for hanging out with me on a Tuesday. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, the like button, smash that guy, and leave some comments on your thoughts on this basketball game. You know what? It's always a great day to be a Tar Heel. Until tomorrow, peace.